Wow, okay, you really weren't kidding around this time, huh? Nuclear risks, CBRN threats, it's a lot.
Yeah. No, it's some heavy stuff. And, with, well, everything going on in Ukraine, it's definitely got people's attention.
For sure. It's interesting because looking at all this material, you start to see just how much I guess, the landscape of global threats is really kind of shifting, right? I mean, we're talking about tactical nukes now, the vulnerability of these power plants. It's a different world.
Absolutely. And it's not just theoretical anymore, right? We're seeing it play out in real time, and that's a big deal.
Yeah. Speaking of which, there's this one article from CBRNe World.
CBRNe World.
Yeah, it stands for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear, and Explosives. Anyway, they have this line that really kind of threw me. They said, and I'm quoting here, an improving situation in Ukraine makes a nuclear launch more possible. I don't know about you, but that sounds cool. It sounds kind of backwards to me.
Yeah, I can see why that would raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, like why would success for Ukraine potentially make things even more risky?
Right. Well, you have to remember, for decades, the whole idea of using nuclear weapons has been pretty much unthinkable, right? I
Yeah.
mean, mutually assured destruction and all that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be vaporized.
Right, the whole you nuke me, I nuke you back kind of deal.
Exactly. But the conflict in Ukraine has really forced everyone to kind of reevaluate that whole, I guess, that whole doctrine, especially when we're talking about these smaller tactical nukes that, well, that Russia keeps hinting at.
Okay, yeah, the tactical thing. I feel like that word gets thrown around a lot. So what's the difference between like a tactical nuke and just a regular, like the strategic nukes that everyone's kind of terrified of?
Good question. Basically, tactical nuclear weapons are kind of what they sound like.
Hmm.
They're meant for use on a battlefield.
Yeah.
Smaller yields, more localized effects, compared to those big strategic nukes, which are more, I guess you could say, designed for wiping out entire cities.
So smaller, but still like really, really bad.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, make no mistake, even a limited tactical detonation, you're still talking about catastrophic consequences.
Yeah.
Immediate casualties, long-term health impacts, the environmental damage. It would be devastating.
And to make things even more unnerving, the CBRNe World article, I actually asked a bunch of different experts about this, like what would it even take for Russia to actually use a nuclear weapon? And it was interesting, scary, but interesting because they didn't all agree.
Right, and that's what makes this whole situation so unpredictable and, frankly, terrifying.
For sure. And it's not just theoretical, right? I mean, we've got Zaporizhia, we've got...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Zaporizhia is like a giant flashing warning sign when it comes to how vulnerable these nuclear power plants really are.
Especially in a war zone.
Exactly. I mean, they weren't designed to withstand shelling and attacks and, God forbid something really bad happens there. It's not just a Ukrainian problem. It would be a global disaster.
No, absolutely. And the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, they seem really worried. They've been putting out statements about the shelling near the plant, the stress on the workers, the people who are actually there trying to keep everything running. They're calling it an untenable situation,
Yeah.
which, I don't know, that doesn't sound too good.
It's scary to think about, like the potential consequences are just enormous.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, you almost don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We have to think about it. That's how we prevent it from happening, right?
Right, of course. And it really makes you realize, looking at all this stuff, that these CBRN threats, they're not just confined to one region or one type of conflict or
No,
whatever.
it's not at all.
We've got nuclear tensions, we've got industrial accidents. I mean, remember that chlorine spill in Georgia?
Oh, in Aqaba, yeah. Tragic. Really highlights the importance of risk assessment, or I guess in that case, the lack thereof.
Right. I mean, you had a container that weighed like almost 30 tons being lifted by this chain that was only meant for 8 tons. How does that even happen?
I know. It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show, sometimes organizations get so caught up in these big external threats, the things that make the headlines, that they forget about the basics. Safety protocols, internal risks, that sort of thing.
And then boom, 13 people are dead, hundreds injured, all because, I don't know, somebody didn't do the math, I guess.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that these types of incidents, they can happen anywhere, anytime. It's not always some evil plot or a terrorist attack.
Speaking of unexpected, did you see that article about Betty Miller?
Betty Miller. Let me think. Oh, right, the ricin case.
Yeah, the one who poisoned her neighbors. I mean, talk about a bizarre CBRN threat.
Right. It just goes to show you never know where these threats are going to come from.
Like, seriously, this woman was a senior citizen. You'd think she'd be baking cookies, not cooking up ricin in her kitchen.
Right. Well, it's a good thing her psychiatrist was paying attention. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened.
For real, thank goodness for vigilant psychiatrists, huh? But it does kind of make you wonder, like, if someone really wants to do harm, is there any way to stop them?
It's a disturbing thought, isn't it? And it's not always easy to spot those red flags, especially with someone like Betty Miller, who just seemed like, well, like an ordinary grandma. But thankfully, in that case, the system kind of worked, right? Her psychiatrist saw something was off and got the right people involved.
Yeah, true, true. And, the FBI report, it mentioned that she had this whole, I don't know, like a grocery list of other poisons she was experimenting with. Apple seeds, yew leaves, even like foxglove from her garden.
Wow, it's like a botanical version of Breaking Bad, right?
Yeah.
Except not as funny.
Not even remotely. But it really does highlight, the importance of like interagency cooperation.
Oh, absolutely. You've got local law enforcement, you've got the FBI, you've got public health officials. They all need to be on the same page because these threats, like we've been saying,
Yeah.
they could pop up anywhere.
Right, right. So, okay, we've got nuclear threats, we've got accidental spills, we've got, I don't know, poison brewing grandmas. It's a lot. So,
Mhm.
what can be done about all this? Like, how do we even start to prepare for, I don't know, the unthinkable?
Well, I think knowledge is a good place to start, right? The more we understand these threats, the better equipped we are to deal with them.
Hmm.
But beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of really amazing work being done in terms of preparedness and response. One of the articles you sent, the one about Los Alamos National Lab, that was really impressive.
Oh, yeah, LANL, talk about intense. They're basically running these hazmat boot camps for first responders, right?
Yeah, and what's really cool about their program is they're not just simulating these hazmat situations, they're actually using real-world contamination from their research.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they've got these controlled environments where first responders can train for like explosions, chemical spills, even radiation exposure, all under the watchful eye of these
Wow,
experts.
that's next level training right there.
Exactly. And what makes LANL so unique is they deal with both nuclear and chemical hazards, which you don't see that very often.
Makes sense given their history, I guess.
Exactly.
So, okay, after diving into all this stuff, everything from, tactical nukes to ricin, what's the big takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to remember? What should they be thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that these CBRN threats, as different as they may seem, they're all connected.
Hmm.
It's not enough to just focus on one type of risk. We need a more holistic approach, one that involves governments, organizations, and honestly, just individuals taking responsibility for their own safety and the safety of their communities.
Right, it's not about living in fear, it's about being aware, being prepared.
Exactly.
So, as we kind of wrap up here, I've got to ask you this. Given everything we've just talked about, all these potential threats, is there anything that, I don't know, that ordinary people like you and me can actually do to be more prepared? Or are we all just kind of, along for the ride?
I get where you're coming from, but no, I don't think we're powerless. And look, I'm not saying we need to all become like doomsday preppers or anything.
Yeah, no need to build a bunker in the backyard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even small steps can make a big difference. Start by just having a plan.
Okay, like what? What kind of plan?
Well, for example, like know where you would go and what you would do in case of an emergency. Have a go bag ready with essentials like water, food, a first aid kit, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, I think it's also important to talk to your neighbors, get involved in your community, find out what resources are available, if there are any local preparedness groups you can join. Just having those conversations, being aware of the risks, it can make a world of difference.
Knowledge is power, right?
Exactly.
Well, I've got to say, this has been an interesting deep dive, to say the least. Definitely eye-opening. Thanks for walking us through it all.
Anytime. It's
Yeah.
important to have these conversations. And hey, remember, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe out there.